I remember going to pick my son up at this little neighborhood Christian preschool that he went to. His teacher said to me, how was your day? I told her my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And she said to me, you must be really worried. Her saying to me that I must worry, I thought, wait a minute, must I? Do I really need to worry today? And what I told her is, I've decided I'm gonna wait to worry. And that was sort of my mantra all the way through.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lila Rose podcast. Today we are going to be talking about grief and the loss of loved ones and the story of an amazing person, Kendra Tierney, who's a mother of 10, an OG, an original mommy blogger, and the founder of a great business and ministry called Catholic All Year. Kendra's going to share about the beautiful love story of her and her husband, the loss of her husband and how she navigated that with faith, and how that impacted her and her 10 kids, one of whom is only now 4 years old. I think you're going to be inspired by this episode. I went into it thinking, okay, there's going to be some tears here, but I thought there was a lot more peace, great advice, and joy than anything else. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. As always, don't forget to like the podcast if you're on YouTube, like the channel. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you are listening on your podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review and give us 5 stars. That helps the podcast reach more people. Good Ranchers is the #1 place in America to get your meat, your seafood, your poultry, and your pork. There's a very special deal happening today at Good Ranchers, which is meat and poultry and pork all sourced in the United States from American ranchers, and that's you get to pick a free protein with any subscription box that you order. So at checkout, if you use the code Lila, you can get up to a $500 savings plus $15 off that order using the code Lila. This is a special deal just for the month of November, and you're going to love trying Good Ranchers. My husband and I love the meat. We love the poultry. You're not going to find meat of this quality and this ethically sourced in your grocery store. You're going to find it at goodranchers.com. Go to goodranchers.com today and use the code Lila at checkout for up to $500 savings off your subscription box of America's best meat. Kendra, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
I've been wanting to do this for a few months now, so I'm glad it's working out.
Yes, yay.
And you're someone that I admire, and I know a lot of people who admire your work. You've done a lot of work in the liturgical living space, and so let's start there with just your background with your work, and then most importantly, you're the mother of 10, and you've had an amazing marriage, so we're going to get into that and so much more. So let's start with people who may not be familiar with your work. Tell us more about Kendra.
Yeah, so Catholic All Year is the website and my sort of apostolate. It started off as a mommy blog back when those were all the rage. The idea behind Catholic All Year is celebrating the Catholic feast days in the home and bringing the days on the liturgical calendar into our home in order to learn the, doctrine, the lives of the saints, the sort of rhythm of the church year, which is all sort of baked right into the liturgical calendar. It's sort of a framework for how to learn and celebrate and, and all the different days of recommended, penance and celebration that go throughout the year. So that is something that I discovered, with my family and just wanted to share with other people. So now there are books. The Catholic All Year Compendium is the sort of starter one on liturgical living in the home for me. And now we also have things like subscription boxes, membership, lots of products from us and other Catholic makers that can help you bring the Catholic faith into your home.
And you've been doing that while having 10 children.
But yes.
When did you first start doing the mommy blogging thing, which has turned into the full-blown ministry you have now?
I think it was 2010, maybe.
An OG.
Yeah.
You're one of the originals. Wow.
When my oldest son, who's 21 now, was little, he was just one of those kids who asked a lot of questions. And I was raised Catholic, but without any of these sort of liturgical living in the home traditions. And so as he's asking me these questions, I'd have to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And so I started reading books and I started listening to podcasts and researching sort of the history and the answers to his questions. And I realized there's this whole world in the Catholic Church of these crazy sort of macabre patron saints of things and recipes that are associated with feast days and all these things that I had no idea even existed. And it's been just in our home a really fun way to incorporate these church traditions and catechism and build that strong family culture and Catholic identity. And that word identity is so loaded now, but you want your kids to feel like they're part of something. And what I want them to feel part of is their faith, is the Christian church. And so having these crazy traditions and associated activities and foods, I think really helps with that.
So when did you first meet your husband? So I want to start from the beginning, and then we're going to go through marriage. And then also I know you've recently lost your beloved husband. So I want to get into that experience and just how that has all impacted your work and your family.
So we met in 2001. We were both volunteering for the parish youth group for the youth group that I attended when I was in high school and I was back from college. So my parents said I should go and volunteer at the youth group, meet a nice boy, and I go to the meeting for potential volunteers, and I see this guy standing on the steps, and he's tall and he's skinny, and he's wearing what the Marines call BCGs for birth control glasses. These really thick, square tortoiseshell glasses.
But you found that very attractive. It sounds like
I was like, that's it. That's the guy. But yeah, so we got to know each other. But I mean, very quickly we were engaged within 10 weeks of the first time we met. We were
10 weeks.
10 weeks, yeah.
Engaged within 10 weeks.
Yeah.
So when did you feel in your heart this is the one?
I mean, honestly, we don't believe in the concept of soulmates, but there was just something about him. The first time I saw him, I was like, yeah, that guy. And I just sort of made a point of getting in his way until...
What does that look like?
Until he spoke to me. Like literally, if he needed to go into a room, I would just happen to be standing in his way and he would have to talk to me. And he had a policy of not dating the women who were volunteering at the youth group.
Wow.
Because he wanted to, focus on the kids and the gospel. But and also, at that age, we were, all in our 20s. And so everybody's looking for dates to weddings, and he didn't want to be everybody's date to weddings. But yeah, so he ended up asking me out. Oh, I had a fake pumpkin carving party.
A fake one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it turned into a real one, but I was standing there talking to him after Mass, and I said, you should come over. I'm having a party. And I wasn't having a party. And then I said, I'm having a pumpkin carving party.
And that was totally spontaneous.
Yeah, which isn't a thing people, 20-somethings really do. And plus, in Southern California, this was the beginning of October. And if you carve your pumpkin early, they rot and melt into this weird gooey mess. So anyway, I had my fake pumpkin carving party, and he came over. And then I think
it was
started dating.
Just
no, okay. I had other.
Guess what?
I managed to get my squad to come with me and act like this had been a planned thing. Oh, and I invited my parents too, because that's how cool I am and continue to be. And then much later on, my dad, who is, I said to my dad, oh, Jim, you met him at my pumpkin carving party. And my dad said to me, I kind of got the feeling that was the whole point of that party. It's like, oh, no. It's not subtle. But anyway, but it all worked out. He ended up, he proposed to me on the steps of the church. Again, he was a Marine Corps officer at the time in San Diego. And he gave me an ammo can. And fortunately, I knew how to open it. And there was a ring box in there, and and he proposed, and his family was in town, and he had asked my dad and all of that. And then, so we got married about 9 months later. So we were married inside of a year of the first time we laid eyes on each other.
And it sounds like it wasn't just you inviting him to the pumpkin carving party, but he, within 10 weeks, was ready to get down on one knee.
Yeah. And
when did you know first that he liked you?
Well,
or loved you? Sounds like it went right to love.
He invited me to the Marine Corps ball, which, I mean, that's an impressive event to attend. He looked very dashing. And it was just, I think, especially the environment of he was an officer at Marine Corps boot camp. And so to show up there and see this sort of hierarchy and the deference, and he was the first sergeant is yelling at the recruits, "You're going to embarrass us in front of Lieutenant Tierney's girlfriend." So it all just made him seem just this very impressive figure, and he was also just sweet and clearly a good guy. And he was discerning. Well, when I first met him, he was discerning going to seminary and coming back to the Marine Corps as a chaplain.
That did not last long.
But he did the flip open the Bible and close your eyes and touch it thing, and it was a verse from Sirach that says, "Happy the husband of a good wife."
Wow.
So that was good. And also, I'm glad we were Catholic because Sirach isn't in all Bibles.
I was just going to say.
So where would I be now?
Wow, meant to be. Really meant to be.
Yeah, but it went quickly. But he's got a really great family that I immediately got along with well. He got along with my family, and so it didn't feel like it was a particularly didn't feel like a particularly risky decision, even though it did, I guess, seems fast when you say it.
So what was your month and date for your wedding?
It was August. It was August 11th of 2001.
Wow.
Got married, yeah.
So, and then how many years married?
So he passed away in July of 2022, so just before our 21st anniversary. I'm doing the math right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about it's just starting your family life together. You went on to have 10 children together, and he also would go on to battle cancer.
Right. Yeah. So we were both raised Catholic, but like I said before, I not in a way, really, either one of us, not in a way where we really had a great, formation in what we believed. He had sort of a deep, natural sort of sense of right and wrong that was helpful to me because I was kind of a crazy 20-something, and it's still surprising to me that all worked. But the first I had ever heard of not contracepting within marriage was the optional NFP sort of seminar that was part of our marriage prep when we were preparing for marriage in San Diego. And we listened to that Contraception Why Not tape in his car, in his parking garage, and we sort of looked at each other like, wow, this seems pretty extreme. Because we had decided we wanted to have a lot of kids, and 4 was the biggest number of kids either one of us could imagine having. I have one sister. He has a sister and a brother. So we decided, all right, we're going to have 4 kids. And then we listened to this tape, and we decide, all right, well, we don't think, as crazy as it seems, we don't think that we can claim to know better than the Catholic Church on this. So we better just take that leap of faith. And honestly, I look back and, we all have those moments of fiat in our life, right? Where where God asks us, like, will you correspond to this grace that I want to give you? And as uncatechized as I was, as not formed as I was, it was that moment of God saying to me, "Here, will you trust me in this?" And we did. And after we got married, we learned about NFP, and I was approaching it with sort of a very contraceptive mindset, right? Like, all right, fine, we won't use artificial contraception, but we're still going to have our 4 kids, and we're going to wait until he is done with business school. And, well, we were terrible at NFP, and I got pregnant almost immediately. And if you're going to be bad at something, that's a great thing to be bad at. And, over the course of our marriage, we really decided there was a point where we did figure it out after he was first diagnosed.
When was that?
So he was diagnosed 3 days before I found out I was pregnant with Gus, who is about to turn 16. So that's our 4th child. So he was diagnosed with melanoma. 3 days later, I found out I was pregnant with my 4th. And then I found out I was pregnant with my 5th. Very close on after having Gus. Along came Anita, and then we finally figured out NFP and were able to successfully practice it, and decided that because Jim was understandably feeling like the responsible thing to do would be to focus on his treatments. So we did successfully practice NFP for about a year, and I just hated it. I hated it so much, and I really felt like I had a strong preference for us just being completely open to life and open to the number of children that would just come to us naturally. And it took that year. It took months for Jim to sort of come around to see it that way also. But I'm so grateful for our family. And, I look at Gus or Anita, and I'm so glad that that's not the end of our family, even though, I tell people now, like, I'm sort of this cautionary tale now, right? I'm the reason you don't have a big family, because you could end up a single mom of 10 children. But they have been such a comfort and such a joy, and especially, throughout Jim's illness. And then, and then also since it's hard to devolve into that grief, into that focus on yourself when there are so many people around who not only who truly understand what you're going through in a way that nobody outside your immediate family could. And so this is something that we've been through together, that we are still working through together. And I guess we're getting ahead of we haven't talked about the details of of his illness and stuff yet, but just the way that my older kids have stepped up, the way that the younger kids, the little ones, still have so much joy in life, in a way that I think would surprise people. It's been a really beautiful thing.
Our sponsor today is Carly Jean Los Angeles. Carly Jean Los Angeles is a clothing company that shares your pro-life values, that has gorgeous capsule clothing for the every woman. What that means is you're going to find already outfits prepared for you at carlyjeanlosangeles.com, depending on your style, depending on your size, well-made, ethically sourced clothes that you can mix and match to find a great outfit every day. When you wake up in the morning and you're not sure what to put on, Carly Jean Los Angeles has solutions for you. Check out carlyjeanlosangeles.com today, and you can use the code LilaRose at checkout for 20% off your order. That's carlyjeanlosangeles.com, and use the code LilaRose at checkout for 20% off your order. What was it like finding out that Jim had melanoma?
Yeah, so
you're about to be pregnant with your 4th.
Yeah. So what sticks in my mind the most, so his diagnosis was pretty serious right from the beginning. He had a really big mole that was originally misdiagnosed once, and then later when he finally did get it biopsied, it came back immediately as melanoma and as metastatic melanoma. So it had already spread, and the statistics for that aren't great. It's a less than 50% 5-year survival rate for that diagnosis. So immediately it was something that you had to sort of take seriously. But I remember going to pick my son up at this little neighborhood Christian preschool that he went to a couple days a week. His teacher said to me, how was your day? And again with my awkwardness, I told her what had happened in my day, somebody that I didn't particularly know well, but I said, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And she said to me, you must be really worried. And I guess my, little contrary spirit that, or, her saying to me that I must worry, I thought, wait a minute, must I? How are things right now? If I look at my husband, he seems perfectly healthy right now. He has no symptoms of illness, other than just us knowing from this piece of paper that that he has this. My kids are great. We're comfortable financially. We have a roof overhead. We have food to eat. Do I really need to worry today? And so I told her is, I've decided I'm going to wait to worry. And that was sort of my mantra all the way through, is that are we okay today? And really we were. And so I wasn't quite ready to commit to the Padre Pio, pray, hope, don't worry. I wasn't sure I could manage that, but I could wait. I could wait to worry. And so that's what I did all the way throughout his illness, as he went through treatment at the beginning and surgery, and it appeared that he was in remission for 10 years. And then it was rediscovered. So it means that likely it was just there the whole time still. But it spread eventually to his lungs and then to his brain. And but throughout the surgeries, hospitalizations, eventually he was having seizures. He was unable to drive. He wasn't able to do buttons and things. And it was just this really slow sort of progression of him requiring more help. But really each day, it didn't seem like that was the day that we needed to worry, because things were still okay. And that we had so many people praying for us. And I believe so strongly in the power of intercessory prayer, to keep despair at bay. And I just felt like through the whole process that somehow it was going to be okay. Either he was going to be healed, he was going to continue living with this as he had been for so much longer than any of the doctors thought that he ever would, or he wouldn't survive, and I had to trust that somehow we would be okay, even if that happened.
During that time, what about your kids? I mean, how did you and when did you communicate with them? And they're having more kids, obviously, over this is a period of multiple years. And how did that your spirit, affect them? That this is going to be okay. We're going to delay the worry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were open with the kids. Most of them were born, while as Jim was already already had cancer. So it was something that they were sort of always aware of, but he was getting up and going to work every day. He was, attending the kids' school events. He was helping them with homework. And so even though we all knew that this, existed, it really wasn't something that affected our day-to-day life until sort of towards the end. And when he was diagnosed again, because there was a whole 10-year period where it seemed like he had beat this, and it was something that was in the past. And so then we were faced with another sort of crossroads on, do we want to continue to be open to life? Do we want to continue to be open to having more kids?
How many kids at that point?
So I guess at that point we had 9 kids. And I remember being in the car on the way to school with my kids, and because, in a big family, the kids do have a lot of responsibility for their younger brothers and sisters. And so I was still homeschooling all the younger ones, and my 3 oldest were going to St. Monica Academy. And I remember saying to them, we know that Dad's cancer is back. We don't know how that's going to go. This is a, more serious diagnosis than he had before. And I just wanted to talk to the oldest kids and sort of sound them out. Like, how would they feel if we continued to be open to life? If I ended up, pregnant and feeling sick at the same time that Jim was feeling sick. And I knew my daughter, who was our second oldest, I knew she would be on board with it. And I thought that maybe my third son wouldn't really care either way. But my oldest son is really somebody who, he's very pragmatic. He's in engineering school now. He's in aerospace engineering. So he just has that very, sort of pragmatic mindset. And so I'm expecting him to talk about pros and cons. And so he would have been 15. What he said to me is, "I like babies." And that was it. It wasn't this big weighing the benefits and hardships of a new baby. It's that this is a person who would be in his life, and it was just so it was so obvious to him how to value that. And so then we ended up with little Barbara, our caboose. And
how old is she now?
So she's 4 now. She was 2 when Jim passed away, and then her the next brother up, the next one up from her is George, and he's 5 now. But the 2 of them, Jim was pretty sick for most of the time they were around. But they really do have fond memories of him. And one of the as he got less able to run around in the yard with them and things like that, he would read them books. He would sit on the couch and read them books. And so especially little Barbara has this, she really associates listening to stories with her dad. And they loved the Richard Scarry books. And so they would sit on the couch, and he had most of them memorized because he was sort of losing vision. But he could still read them because he'd read them so many times.
So when you found out the second time that the cancer was back, when did worry ever kick in for you?
I would say that I really still was able to rely on hope and on that feeling that I couldn't see how it possibly could be okay, but I could trust that somehow it would be. And when Jim was diagnosed again, that was really the overwhelming feeling for it. And there were so many people praying for him, and all over the world. And I was really hopeful that he would beat it somehow. As it got towards the end, it seemed pretty clear that he wasn't going to beat it, to me. I don't think he ever believed that he was going to die, as young as he did. I think he always thought he was going to beat it. We never had that conversation of like he did set up our finances. He had a will. He set up a trust. All of those things. But as far as us, having that conversation of, if I die, this, that, the other, we never had that conversation. He did record before he had his first brain radiation treatments. There is some chance that it can affect your cognitive abilities. So he wanted to record a message for me and for each of the kids. So I always knew that we had those. He just, put them in a Google Drive folder, and I knew they were there. And so I was pregnant with Barbara when he recorded them, so we didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. But I knew they were there, and I didn't quite feel ready to watch them until the anniversary of his death on July 9th this year. I sort of sat the kids down and showed them on their own, each of them. But
what was that?
It was, it was very comforting to hear, the advice he had for me, and the way that, he was a big fan of the work that I do, and he was really encouraging that I should, try to stick with that, which, as a single mom now, it's, I'm facing decisions on how to provide for my family. Do I keep doing this, or do I go get a more regular person job? And he was very encouraging that I try to stick with this, because he thinks that it's with Catholic All Year. And that was, great very encouraging to hear.
How did it impact the kids to get those messages a year after his passing?
Yeah. So, the kids have really sort of different temperaments. One of my daughters was more affected than others, and she was one of the last to get to him, and we had to hustle out the door to mass, and she was a little emotional about it all. But I think it was overall good, and it's nice that they'll have access to those if they want to see him.
So it sounds like in a sense he was ready to go, in that he was just such a man of faith and virtue. I mean, I got to meet him just a couple of times, and my husband, I remember after meeting him, my husband Joe, who has the military background, was just very impressed, and he had this reputation of just being a man of great virtue and holiness. But it sounds like he was fighting it till the end.
Yeah. No, he really was. And he was a person who really had a goal of growing in personal holiness. And he had, this plan of life that he worked off of, and these different spiritual sort of exercises that he would do every day, and that I think the Marine Corps is part of that, and and his Catholic upbringing, but really he had a deep and authentic faith, and that was the way he lived his life, and that's the way he went through his battle with cancer, and it's the way he died. And there's so much consolation for his family in that. And as much as I wish every day that he were still with me, there's some part of me that doesn't want to begrudge him having run his race. And of course, we can't we can't know what has happened to our loved ones, but we have every reason to hope that and to expect that Jim is in heaven. And his last real conversation on earth was confession with our friend Father Matt, who came over and visited him on a Thursday, the last food that he ate was the Eucharist, and our pastor, Father Marcos, came over to give him the last rites, and his eyes were closed. You could sort of rouse him, but he really wasn't interacting anymore. And Father Marcos was reading, read a little passage from the gospel, and Jim opened his eyes to listen. And then he asked him if he wanted to receive the Eucharist, and he said yes. And that was the last word he ever said. It was the last food he ate. I tell anyone who will listen to me now, go to confession, because as much as, you need it for you, you never know what's going to happen. And it is such a comfort to our family to know that he had the last rites, that he made a good confession, that he had this holy death. And Catholics have this tradition of praying to Saint Joseph for a happy death. And that's a surprising thing to hear if you've never heard it before. But the tradition is that Joseph died at home with Our Lady and Jesus. And so what could be a happier death than that, right? And so we pray to Saint Joseph for a happy death. And Jim died, in our home, surrounded by his children, his parents, his brother and sister, my sister, and I wasn't sure when. It was hard to know, when is it really the end, and is this going to be a long process? To call his parents and say, like, hey, I think you guys better get out here. That's not a call that you want to make, and it's I sort of liken it to not wanting to when you're pregnant and you don't want to show up at the hospital and have them tell you, no, you're not really in labor, go home. I didn't want to tell everybody, like, this is it, this is the end, and have it, not be. But I felt like, all right, this seems serious, and I don't want them to miss it. So I, let his parents know, I let his family know, and then I sort of faced this decision: do I let our friends know, or do I keep this sort of quiet and private? And just sort of mulling it over and thinking, so many people have known that he was sick, and so many people have been praying for him. And Catholic tradition is not to have death be quiet and private. Catholic tradition is that it's something that we support each other through, and that we share. And so we had the hospice. I couldn't get him to agree to hospice until he was no longer responsive. And so once he was not responsive anymore, we called hospice, and hospice is such a beautiful ministry that they come and help prepare families, who help you prepare the home and resources that you need for somebody who's dying in the home. So they came and set up a bed in a sort of semi-public part of our home. And we told everybody, and one of my good friends set up sort of a schedule, but we said, like, people can come whenever. And I mean, there were rosaries being said in my house all the time. And that was something that I was really grateful for too, in particular in that moment, is the rosary, because people would come and they would, go and they would greet me, they would greet the children, they would go and say what they wanted to be able to say to Jim. And then we'd start a rosary. And I mean, we did dozens of rosaries. And this was, I guess, Friday. This was through the day on Friday, and then he eventually died in the middle of the day on Saturday. But so Friday and Saturday, so many of our friends. I'm not great with numbers, so I don't want to say a particular number. But I mean, people were just in and out all day, and I ended up really grateful that we did share that, because I don't know, that I think that sort of American culture is to keep death, quiet and, away from children and not talk about it, not think about it. But being surrounded by our friends, being surrounded by prayer, being supported in that way was, I think it was really meaningful to our family and to our friends who got to say goodbye to him.
EveryLife.com is America's pro-life diaper company. You want baby products for the little loved one in your life? You're going to love EveryLife.com. These are ethically sourced products, diapers, wipes, baby products, and they are products that are made by a pro-life company that shares your values and gives back to the pro-life movement. Check out these high-quality, wonderful products for your little one at EveryLife.com and use the code Lila10 at checkout for 10% off your order. That's EveryLife.com, America's pro-life baby company. You're going to love the products on the site. They're cute. They're ethically sourced. They're the highest of quality. That's EveryLife.com. Use the code Lila10 at checkout for 10% off your order. What was the hardest part about Jim's death for you?
I mean, so there's the losing this person who is your one person. That's got to be sort of the worst part of it. The hardest part is the logistics afterwards. I mean, it was, and this is, he had done some planning ahead of time to try to get things in order, but I mean, it was at least 2 months of full-time effort to get everything changed over into my name, to get, life insurance policies sorted out, and every little thing that's in his name, and all these different accounts, and retirement accounts from every different job that he'd had. So he created a doc that had all of at least all the names of the financial institutions, all the everywhere he had worked, things, all of those things, which was really useful. But that part was really hard, and you're having to deal with all of this, like, so much paperwork right on the heels of of this loss. So it's kind of a double whammy of unpleasantness.
What was it like for the kids? And also, you're busy. I mean, you have 10 children, including a 2 or almost 3-year-old. And you're now dealing with all this paperwork, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And how is it managing that, and how were they doing?
So my sister stayed and helped me. We were able to have the funeral mass and the reception pretty quickly. And, I had so many friends able to help with that. It was a really, really beautiful mass. And yeah, again, just, I think that we had those consolations and the comfort of this happy death, of knowing that he had lived his life as well as he could, and being really supported by a great community was helpful. And different kids have different temperaments. One of my daughters, who is sort of my one kid who notices when things need doing and does them.
Does she take after Jim?
Yes, yeah. I think.
And the rest take after you?
But she's just she's a doer of things, and she's very responsible. And it felt like she was feeling sort of a real burden of things undone around the house. And so when my sister headed back to her house in Iowa, I asked her to take my daughter with her and go. She's got 2 girls who are about, so 2 cousins who are about her age, and it felt like she needed to not be in the chaos of my house. Not because I didn't need her; she would have been really helpful. But all the rest of the kids, it wasn't going to bother them if things weren't up to our usual standards. So and the kids dealt with it in different ways. One of my sons, his best friend, had also lost his father, and it was strange for them to all of a sudden have this in common. But, his mom just offered to come and pick him up, and what he wanted was to hang out with people and be with other people. And some of the kids wanted to have more quiet time alone. And so there's no right or wrong way to, well, I suppose there are some wrong ways, but, within reason, everybody's going to process things a little bit differently. And there's this standard sort of portrayal in the media of what I call the very sad widow. And I was trying to, I'm a person who likes to do things, and I had, my sort of needlework projects, or some crafting projects that I just sort of wanted to sit quietly. And when I didn't have anything else to do, I wanted to watch TV and do my projects. And every show I tried to start had this, and they were really different shows who all happened to have a character who had been widowed and was unable to function, of basically abandons her children and can't take care of anything because of her grief. And I would see that and be like, that is, how do I stop that from happening to me? How do I stay engaged? How do I process my grief, but still stay engaged with my family and not have them suffer the loss of both of us because I'm, refusing to interact with them? And again, I think that's, I call her the very sad widow, but it's really the despairing widow. And so to avoid falling into despair, the textbook definition of despair is when you doubt God's ability to be big enough to deal with your problem or to forgive your sins specifically. So you'd say, well, there's, I have no recourse to God because my sins are so big that he couldn't forgive me. I couldn't go to heaven. But then also to not think, my personal tragedy is so big that I couldn't give it to God, that I couldn't turn to God in this. And, and I think that's how, and you can feel that, the presence of that despair and, just trying to keep it at bay by turning to prayer. And if you can't, by asking other people to pray for you. And again, that's where that intercessory prayer comes in, because sometimes you're just not in a place where you can pray for yourself. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to have other people, carrying you at that time.
What does that look like for you, being in a place where maybe you're feeling numb or just so temptation on an emotional level to despair, where you feel that you can't pray? And then what do you do in those moments?
Yeah, for me, it was just having a couple friends that I really felt like I could trust. And it was something that I really struggled with, that everybody that I would meet would tilt their head to the side and say, how are you doing? As if this acquaintance from school, like I'm really gonna just lay it all out for you here at this Christmas party, So that's something that was hard to figure out how to navigate this sort of new world of not only being a widow, but of people reacting to you in a particular way. And I didn't want to really dwell on things like that. So it was having just one or two people that I confided in, one or two people who knew. It was two. One, my sister and a good friend. So to not, lay that on everyone, but to have a couple people that I knew that could help me carry that burden, and then try to rise to the occasion for other people and for my kids, and spend that time with them, interact with them, listen to them. And really, they are doing really well. Another thing that I did, I wore black for 6 months, and I kind of wish I'd done it for a whole year.
Why?
Yeah. So the sacraments are an outward expression an inward truth, that it's something that allows us to, in sort of a tactile way, experience this truth. And so for me, wearing black was an outward expression of the inner change that had happened in my life. And I, it's something that really went, what it is a part of so many cultures throughout history. And it's only, very recently that we don't have any, that it's no longer traditional for to have these outward expressions of mourning. And I think that it's this sort of odd suppression of public mourning, where it used to be that even extended family, you'd wear a band so that people would know that you were in mourning and they could treat you accordingly. Now, me wearing black, because I live in our time and our society, I just look like a hostess at a fancy restaurant or a middle-aged goth person. But I knew, and the people who knew me, it was sort of a reminder to them of what I was going through in a way that didn't have to be discussed. It was a quiet reminder to other people. And to me, it was this outward expression of an inner truth. And I sort of, I decided to stop wearing all black at 6 months, and I think that kind of, that it probably would have been better for me to stick with it for a whole year, because I think that, to me, once I had taken off the black, I was like, all right, let's get back to real life. Let's get back to, to my obligations. And, but when I was wearing black, I think it sort of gave me, it was me giving myself permission to really be a widow. And I think that I should have, that it would have been better for me to continue that a little bit longer. And I know, it's so uncommon for people to do it, but I don't know why, because I personally found it really helpful.
What advice would you give to someone who has lost recently a spouse or a very dear loved one? It sounds like you approached grief in a very intentional way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I did. And I know that, the way I see the world isn't how everybody sees the world, and the way that I experience grief isn't how everybody experiences grief. But there's sort of standard advice on don't make big decisions when you're in the middle of grief, and that I think is really good advice. And to have those sort of set milestones, and again, there used to be the sort of an imposed by society sort of mileposts on what it was appropriate for somebody who had lost a spouse to do at this number of months or years afterwards. And we've lost that as that sort of framework as a society. And so we're left to figure out for ourselves what would be appropriate. And I know for me, I just wasn't making great decisions those first few months. And I think that it would have been helpful to have society sort of supporting me, with those sort of advice on here's when it would be appropriate to do this, here's when it would be appropriate to do this. But again, I was so fortunate to have a good community, to have good friends. And so I would say that to don't make big decisions for, at least 6 months, maybe a year, to really focus on, to find a couple of people that you can really trust with your grief. And that I read somewhere about these circles of grief, because the people all around me were also affected by my husband's death, right? So my kids were also, but also the people at our school and the people that he worked with. And so you're supposed to seat yourself in these circles, and you're allowed to complain to people farther away, and you support people, on an inner ring. And so, to find people who, because my sister, my best friends were also really close with Jim, so they were suffering too. But I was able to find somebody who wasn't gonna, who like she could dump her grief to an outward circle and just listen and support me. So to find somebody who sort of has an understanding of sort of this, whatever this grief hierarchy is. But yeah, so to trust my kids to be able to handle the circumstances that they're presented with. And I know, my oldest son is now the, man of the house, and has he was home this summer teaching little kids to tie their shoes and ride bikes. And, I'm sure wasn't expecting to have that sort of responsibility at the age of 21, but, trying to sort of find that, walk that line between respecting his, respecting him as a young man, who, was parented by his father and is therefore sort of the best, the one most likely to be able to sort of continue his legacy with the kids. And then still recognizing that these are not his children and he is 21 years old. But I think that he has been such a support to me. Mm-hmm. All the kids have, but so much of the responsibility kind of falls on him as the oldest. And so it's been just really impressive to me to see the kids supporting each other, and all the older kids have. It's so hard to give advice because everybody's situations are different, and I think that depending on the circumstances of the death, was it sudden? Were you prepared for it? Is it something that's more tragic to be dealing with? I feel like I went through it in sort of best case scenario in a lot of things. So I can't speak to, to other people who are dealing with much more challenging situations. We have really supportive family, really, kids who are supporting each other and me, that, this community that we're in. And I know not all people have that sort of ideal, as they're going through it.
How do you navigate with all 10 of them now? You have 10. The grief processes, you mentioned multiple times they have different temperaments. Mm-hmm. And you're obviously having to run your business, do the practical stuff, your own grief process. How do you manage to check in or navigate what they're going through and be there for them while still taking care of all the other things that you have to take care of?
Yeah. So my oldest and my third, which are both sons, are they're in college locally. So they live in an apartment but come home often. And then my middle daughter, second child, is at UMary in Bismarck, North Dakota, which is very far from Los Angeles. And then the rest of the kids are at home. So Father's Day was really hard for my oldest daughter, because there was a day that was that the rest of us were able to be together, and she wasn't. I think it was Father's Day, and it was hard for her because Jim died, and then And it was, a month later we drove her or month and a half, 2 months, we drove her to college to drop her off. And so these aren't people who knew her dad. These aren't people who really know, she would have to specifically tell them, hey, my dad just died, So these aren't people who had known her before, not people who knew her dad. So it's a great and really, the administration, the university president knew, and he's been really sweet and supportive to her. He wrote her a very beautiful letter, Monsignor Shea. Wrote her a really beautiful letter.
I'm a big fan of Monsignor Shea.
Yeah, he's
how
good
special.
People. He's good people. Yeah, I mean it's a really beautiful letter. So I know he is really like specifically looking out for her. But knowing that she's in this different environment, and so I have to remember to check in with her on these days that she might be feeling alone, whereas the rest of us, have each other together. But again, I keep trying to, I'll take one aside and be like, so how are you really? And really, they do seem to be doing really well. And I know that their dad's death isn't something that will ever go away for them. And it's something that is going to change over the course of their lifetimes. And there will be times that they really wish he was there. And then, my youngest, who was 2 when he died and was there, he passed away. Everyone cried. And little 2-year-old Barbara looks around, sees that everybody's crying, and kind of starts fake crying because she doesn't really know what's going on, but everyone's crying. I guess they're supposed to be crying. And I just kind of like grab her and be like, stop that. So it's going to be really different for her than it is for my oldest daughter or for my oldest son, who had him in their lives for a long time. But we also believe, that he can still look after our family, even though he's not physically here with us. And we know that we can, pray for the repose of his soul, and we can still ask him to intercede for us. And, I just have a lot of trust that he's looking out for all of them now.
I've heard it said before that the quality of someone's life does greatly impact the quality of their death. Not just that, you can't live a good life and still have a tough death, or vice versa. And by quality, I don't mean easy, but I mean what you were talking about earlier, which is a sense of peace, that kind of deep peace that is an eternal happiness that can lead to that. Do you think that, what was the approach that you and Jim had and how you parented your kids together that it seems really has set them up for a grief process that's not as, maybe, I don't want to diminish it, complicated is maybe the word, but I know for some children I've talked to or families I've talked to, people close to me even, that, the complications that one may have with their parent or with the loved one, brokenness, woundedness, traumas can make the death processing in some ways so much more painful.
Yeah. So, I would say that sort of the two pieces of that, as I see it, are regret and sort of general resiliency. And I know that I can genuinely look at my marriage and not have regrets. And I was so fortunate in him, and that we were really well suited to one another. We had that chemistry and mutual respect, and that I think that because we were both trying to be the best people and the best Christians that we could be, that also, necessarily makes you strive to be better spouses. But, by the grace of God, I don't look back on, the decisions that we made in our marriage, and especially, the decision to be open to life, and that, I now have all these little pieces of him that I still get to have in my life, and and the way that we made his treatment decisions, the way that I was able to be in the hospital with him, and, just little memories of that, and the kids coming and visiting him in the hospital. And because of the COVID regulations, we couldn't have all of the kids come and visit him. So I would get permission to take him for a walk in the wheelchair, and I would take him out of the hospital. And we'd meet in the courtyard, and we'd have feast day dinners together at the picnic tables with all the kids. We had priests who would come and visit in the hospital, and we're saying masses. We would say mass for our family at the hospital, and just all these just really beautiful and great memories that we had, and things that we did together as a family, even even at the end, as his symptoms were as his disease progressed and as his symptoms got worse.
You spoke very beautifully about your relationship, which I wanted to ask about too, but you've already shared just that it sounds like you approached it where you were not going to have regrets,
right,
with how you loved each other in your marriage, which is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
How many of us married, I'm only 5 years in, but I can name some things that I wish I'd done differently already. That's a...
Yeah, so regret, and then the other piece is that resilience. Mm. And that was just sort of a core value for Jim. And I think that that growing up on the south side of Chicago and being a Marine, it was just something that was really important to him, that the kids, that we taught the kids to be, to be self-starters, to have, some freedom and autonomy to do things on their own, to discover things, to try things, and to, to be tough, and to, deal with challenges. And that was just right from the beginning, something that Jim cared a lot about teaching them. And it's that quote that probably isn't by Pope Benedict, but that you weren't made for comfort, you were made for greatness. And to just, it was important to him that we not have that focus on ease and comfort, that we would, tell the kids that, Tierneys do things the Tierney way. Tierneys can handle spicy food. Tierneys can handle, when Tierneys get hurt, they say, ouch, ouch, ouch. And he had no idea that the thing that he was preparing them for was his death. But I think that sort of, that overall focus on being resilient and not denying that difficult things have happened, not denying the, that something is painful. It's being able to go on anyway, to go on in the face of hardship. It's not denying it. It's the only way out is through. And so I think that he did sort of prepare all of us, for being able to handle it.
That's an incredible example, I think, to me and to anyone listening, of how to live. And in a sense, our whole life, we are preparing for death. And so how we live is how, in many ways, how we die.
Mm-hmm.
What about your sons? How many sons do you have?
5 and 5.
5 and 5.
Yeah.
And some of them, the youngest son is how old?
He is 6.
How do you look at that, your new responsibility of being a single mother to all those sons?
Yeah, it's something that is a little daunting, I will say, and especially because Jim was such, a big presence, such an important influence. I look at, when my older sons I see them doing things that I know they learned from my husband, and I think, oh no, how will the younger ones do that? And
like
so,
what? What's an example?
So we host a women's conference at my house every fall. I just had it, the Fiat conference, and it's always been like an all hands on deck thing for our family. That it's something we put on for the community. And so my older sons are the security guards, and but they're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, carrying things, setting things up, and it's not for them, it's not for their friends, and so that's just something that Jim had this expectation that this is mom's thing that she does, and we are all gonna help her do it.
Wow.
And so that has continued. We just put on another one, and my boys they came home from college, are up at 5 o'clock in the morning, setting up tables for it. And then, just little things like my third son, Bobby, found a dead butterfly, but he found this butterfly that was perfect. And, he took it and he went and gave it to little Barbara, and he was telling her, all about the different parts of the butterfly, and he got her a little container to hold it in. And one of the artisans at our little artisan fair at the conference overheard him telling Barbara all about this butterfly, and she came to me and she said, I know that's the example that Jim set for them of this masculinity that is based in service, that of caring for our family. And it's just so touching, to see that reflected in, these giant sons of mine, who are looking after the little ones. And so how do I recreate that for my younger sons? And my hope is that the older sons will, pass that along. And also we have this great community, and Mr. Bowles is my troublesome, my most lovable troublesome boy is in his Boy Scout troop.
Perfect.
And
I heard he did a backpacking camping trip with Boy Scouts. It makes sense one of your kids would have been it, because I remember joking around with my brother, his son-in-law, and saying, what a man to go, and none of these are his grandsons.
Right.
He's doing this out of love for the community. He spends lots of time with his grandsons too. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like they're like adopted grandsons.
No, they really are. And it feels really meaningful to me that the men who were my husband's good friends, they have really, been there for my kids. And, when one of them was having trouble in school, and I decided, all right, I'm going to just bring him home and homeschool him for the rest of the year. And his godfather says, well, do you want him to come and live with us?
Wow.
For the rest of the semester. And I was like, that is a really, he has 11 kids of his own. And so, but this is, Jim's friends really, really loved him. And I know that, I can count on them. One of my other son's godfathers came and, helped me supervise the kids' birthday parties, and entertaining and hospitality was always something that was really important to both of us. And to Jim and I, and we would host a lot of events at our house. And I was wondering, how can I keep doing that? We have a St. Patrick's Day party that is usually 350 people at my house. And I'm thinking, how am I going to manage this? And one of our friends just texted me before the party. He says, my 2 teenage sons and I are going to be at your house at this time to, help you set up. And they came, and, so my expectation is that, that the people who loved Jim, and we also have, both of their grandfathers are really involved in their lives. And and still, loving them and setting a good example for them. So my hope is that, the presence of all of these people, all these men who loved Jim and were, and that their lives were affected by him, that, that my kids will feel that. There's a really interesting talk that William Bennett gave about that, you hear all these statistics about how terrible it is for children to lose their father. But apparently those statistics aren't the same for kids who lost their parents in war or in the line of duty in some way, that when kids understand that their fathers didn't want to leave them, that their fathers loved them, and especially if they lost their lives in this pursuit of some sort of great good, that they don't experience that loss in the same way. And so I am really hopeful that my kids, they know and understand that their dad fought so hard to stay here with them, even though we believe in this beautiful afterlife, that we hope that he's in this eternal happiness, and he understood that and still wanted to stay with us for as long as he could. So I think that my kids, I think that they understand that.
He left an incredible legacy, and the one that you're still building, of community and faith and family, that I think can make so much of the difference. How do you now manage your time to make space for liturgical living in the faith? That has primacy in your life. Parenting 10 unique souls, business, friendships. It sounds like your husband especially had so many friendships. You're very hospitable.
Yeah, I would say that is the part of this that I'm struggling with the most. That trying to prioritize things, trying to decide, when to coddle myself a little bit, when to, give myself a kick in the pants to start accomplishing some things. I think that's hard, and it's got to be. I think that it's. I have been, I guess, a working mom for a long time, but I've never seen myself as that. It always just sort of was a side hustle, and I was a stay-at-home homeschooling mom. And I want to, but my kids are in school now, so that I can, try to focus on making the business success. But at the same time, I still want to have that feeling in my home of that my kids are the priority. And it is really hard. And I have a lot of, respect and sympathy now for single moms, for working moms, for people trying to figure out how to prioritize these things. And I would say that I have officially not figured all of that out.
How do you give yourself grace in that process of figuring out how to be that single parent, that business owner, grief, being a widow?
Yeah, I think that a big part of it has been that so there's another Padre Pio quote that I really love, that it says, something to the effect of, "Blessed is the crisis that made you, that made you look to God. Blessed is the fall that made you reliant on God." And that has been, I think, something that I've been really grateful to have been able to, sort of find my way through over these past few months, and end up in a place of spending a lot more time in prayer, and a lot more time in personal prayer than I ever did before. Because, I always sort of considered myself like, all right, I'm this worker bee. God gives me these inspirations. God has given me these jobs. I'm just going to work, and I'm going to get these things done for the kingdom. And as for whatever reason, my worker bee mentality hasn't been bringing the same sort of success that it did when my husband was alive. And I've really found recourse in prayer in a way that I didn't have before. And so in some ways it just feels like this is the season. This is where God wants me right now, to feel really reliant on him and not feel like I can rely on myself, not feel like I can accomplish everything, to see that if I'm working just as hard and things are not as successful as they used to be, then that's a big reminder of that it was never me to begin with. And that I've always been a big proponent of the sort of bless it or block it prayer, that if God wants me to be doing something, then he's gonna, and obviously it does require that, personal commitment, but if God wants something to be a success, then it will be. And if it's not, then maybe that's because he wants me to be spending my energy in a different place somehow. But I would say that, that it's that sort of feeling of when your life doesn't look exactly the way that you wish it would, and you don't see an immediate plan, like I love a plan. And when I look at my life and I see, well, there's no plan I can make that gets me to the life I had before. There's no plan I can make that gets me really to a clear, place where I would consider myself in like an ideal family situation again. There's no plan I can make for that. And so all I can do is, like St. Peter, when he says, where else can we turn? Where there is nowhere else to turn. And so, it just is allowing yourself to feel that vulnerability and turn to God.
That's such a powerful prayer. Bless it or block it.
Yep.
It's good.
No, it's good.
And to know we do what we can, but at the end of the day, the Lord is the one that blesses or blocks. Mm-hmm. The Lord does what he will.
Right. And I honestly appreciate that reminder, because I think that for people who are like religious professionally, that it's easy to sort of think like, here's me doing all this good stuff, when you have to realize, like, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who says, I'm just a pencil, that she's not, she's saying, I'm not the one doing all these things. I'm just, working. I'm just accomplishing what God wants me to accomplish. And so to realize, like, none of this was me to begin with. This was all God. This was, by the grace of God, I was able to correspond to, and do some of these things that he wanted me to do. And if he wants it to look different now, then that's allowed.
Kendra, thanks so much for joining the podcast. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for people to follow your work more. And where can people find your work?
CatholicAllYear.com. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. And I'm pretty easy to find. Uninformed.
Awesome. And unformed. Register with any parish and find formed. Thank you so much, Kendra.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Lila Rose podcast. As usual, don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening, if it's on YouTube or your podcast app. And don't forget, if you're on podcast app, to leave us a review. Every review, 5 stars, helps the podcast reach more people. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.